Okay, everybody, let's get going. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand, and those of you who are joining us online. My name is Steve Needham. I'm the Regional Communications Officer for ILO Asia Pacific, based here in Bangkok. Welcome to this launch of the Asia Pacific Employment and Social Outlook 2024. Sometimes we refer to it by its acronym of APESO. So if you hear APESO get mixed in somehow, that's what we're talking about. This is a major ILO publication for the region. We produce this every 2 years. It looks at labour market trends and projections for Asia and the Pacific. But every edition we also do something a little different. 2 years ago we looked at various sectoral employment in construction, in agriculture, etc. This time around we've looked at the issue of aging populations, which I think everybody is obviously very interested in, and the impacts this will have on the labour markets going forward. We have three... Hello, have I gone? We have three speakers here with us today. Ken Shamuvashawa is our senior economist of the ILO Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. His unit produced this report, and Ken will run us through the main findings. We're also very happy to have here with us two distinguished speakers who will help give their insight and excuse me, put my teeth back in, an analysis on the findings. We have with us Associate Professor Dr. Rutia Bula-Orr, who is the Vice Dean of the College of Population Studies and Director of the Collaborating Centre for Labour Research of Chulalongkorn University. And we also have with us Dr. Srinivas Tata, who is the Director of the Social Development Division of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, UNESCAP, who are here to give their insight and input. We'll do the usual thing. Once everyone's spoken, we'll turn to the floor and online for any Q&A. The press release is available. The report is also available. If you want to grab one, there's a QR code at the front of the room, or you can pick up a physical copy. If you're following us online and you want to get a copy, please drop your email address in the chat, and we can email one over to you. The embargo for the press release is down as 3 p.m. Bangkok today. Okay, that's good, all from me. Okay, let's get going, and I will hand the floor to Ken, who will run us through the findings of the report. Ken, over to you.
Thank you so much, Steve. Again, welcome everybody to this very important launch of the APESO. I'll start by just giving these figures for a region that is so heterogeneous. A region that has 4.4 billion people, 36 countries, that has sub-regions of East Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Pacific, with populations ranging between 10,000 to 1.4 billion, but also having GDP per capita incomes that are hugely different, 1,400 to about 102,000 in dollars. This is, colleagues, a region that has 2 billion people in employment. As you can see, our graph there, showing two important labor market indicators that have taken a decline since the 1990s. The labor force participation rate, which is at 60.5% in 2024, will eventually get to 60.1% in 2026. The employment to population ratio at 58.2 will eventually go to 57.4 in 2026. But we've also seen that as the decline came in, then we got a deeper decline because of the pandemic. But again, we have had a full recovery. As you can see that from 2020, we got an upward trend. But why this decline? So two important issues really have influenced this decline. The first one is that the population is aging. So aging is important, and it happens when some fundamentals in the labor market change. So for example, whether it's life expectancy increases, but also sometimes fertility rates are going down. Each of those factors can affect aging or both of them. But at the same time, we have seen youth participation rates going down in the region, and mostly it's because of youth enrollment in education. So these two factors can explain the persistent decline that we have seen since the 1990s to date. Interestingly, the employment rate remains at 4.2%, and this is seen not to change next year. But when you look at that in terms of the unemployed people, in terms of the absolute numbers, that does translate to about 88 million people. But it's also interesting that as we look at unemployment numbers, we also look at another subset of people who want employment but are not searching. So they could be discouraged workers. There could be people who may want employment, but they're facing barriers. It could be childcare. It could be something like that. Now, when we look at that number, 76 million in the region, and if you add that to those who are unemployed, we get a figure of 164, which really should be seen as the total number of unmet need for employment, which is called the jobs gap. And that gets to about 8% in the region. So apart from just the unemployment issues, we have cases of people wanting to work, but who are not searching. And the jobs gap does define kind of a better indication of the labor market in terms of employment and those who are not looking for, who are looking for it, but are not, who want it, but are not searching. At the same time, the region has a 22% rate of youth who are not in employment, education, or training. But I think what's more interesting is that we do see gaps, gender gaps, in terms of the need rates, with women having 32% and the men just having 12%. But again, it's important to take note that when we look at gender gaps in general, the global figures compared to what we have in the region, we have relatively smaller gender gaps in this region. In fact, in this region, we have an employment rate for women which is actually lower than that of men. So interesting figures there, particularly the 32% and the 12% for need rates. In terms of quality of work, there has been slow progress in the region. So we see people who are working, but who are actually in the informal employment, and the figures are 1.3 billion people. This means 2 out of 3 workers are actually in informal employment. So 66% of the people that are actually in informal employment. But again, when we look at these figures again, we realize that workers that are living in extreme poverty amount to about 73 million. But of course, taken together, when we look at those who are in extreme poverty, those who are in moderate poverty, and those who are in informal employment, we see that these numbers have actually increased between 2022 and 2023. So yeah, there is some slow progress there to improve quality of work. And of course, the pandemic gave us more difficulties. But again, we have not done much in terms of improving quality of work since the pandemic. But Asia and the Pacific is the fastest aging region in the world today. If you look at the ratio of the population of age 65 plus to that aged 15 to 64, we see we see that the Asia and Pacific will double that ratio between between 2023 and 2050. In fact, it will move from 0.15 to 0.3. But again, when you look at that region and you try to look at the sub-regions, you see a lot of heterogeneity. We see, for example, that East Asia has the highest ratio, moving from 0.23 to 0.53 in 2050, seconded, of course, by the Pacific, and the South Asia, 0.1 to 0.21 is the last. But again, if you look at the report, we also have details of countries. But just to give an example here, you see that it's not the whole region that is actually aging. It's, Pakistan, for example, it doesn't seem to be aging that fast, 0.07 to 0.10 as a ratio in 2050. But again, if you look at Korea, the Republic of Korea, it gets to 0.75. And of course, there are countries there like Japan as well, Thailand as well, which are also high up there in terms of the ratios of population aged 65 plus to that of 15 to 64. But what is the main message here? Those in the high income countries doubled that ratio in 60 years. Asia and Pacific is going to double that ratio in 27 years. So the speed of population aging is really high for Asia and Pacific. And of course, that will also mean a lot other things that will be important to ameliorate the effects that can come with such kind of speed. So of course, aging, and of course we have talked about youth participation rates going down. They all have an impact on labor force participation. And of course, this has been falling. If you look at the sub-regions, you see that almost all the sub-regions will have a falling labor force participation rate, from 1991 to 2050. If you look at the Asia Pacific itself as a whole, you see that that percentage will move from 67 to about 55. It is important to note the kind of concomitant relationship or challenges that will come with this. One of it is that then you get your economic dependency ratios high, because the ratio of those who are employed to those who are not employed becomes larger and larger. We see here that between 2023, the economic dependency ratio would jump from 0.7 to about 1 to 0.9 there. That is huge. And that, of course, means that we all have concerted efforts to do to ensure that labor markets, decent work deficits, and quality of work and all that are actually ensured. But something important that I would like to mention is that although there is this demographic shift, although there is this aging, the story is not necessarily bad. In fact, productivity growth may be key to support a number of positives in the labor markets, including the relationship with the GDP per capita growth. So what it means is that if we maintain a productive growth that is good enough, we are likely to dominate the demographic effect. And that means that the effect that we may have from aging may not necessarily be as bad. So what it means then is that we will need to foster that growth. We will need policies that will encourage that productive growth. But we will also need to train people, to retrain them, to skill them, so that we can avert labor shortages. Because labor shortages will come in because probably people have some low education, so they cannot fill up, vacancies. There could also be skills mismatches. It could be any of these. But we can avert these labor shortages through training and retraining and ensuring that productivity growth actually dominates the democratic effect. But what is specific that this report found about older workers, which I think is really important? And somebody said to me last time, which always comes back to mind, and said, you may be young, I'm not very young, of course, you may be young today, but young people of today are older workers of tomorrow. So I'm also in it. I think most of us are in there. Now, the report has found that when we compare to those who are aged between 25 and 54, older workers are facing worse working conditions than those. For example, they are likely to have 18% higher informality. They are likely to have 10% fewer high-skilled occupations. They are likely to be 26% more in agriculture. And we know the decent deficits that accrue in agriculture. But they're also to 9% more own account and contributing family work. More interesting with older workers is that when they lose the job that they have, they are not able to get a similar job when they look for it. Not just that they're not able to get it, but for even those who get it, it takes much longer time before they can actually get such a job. At the same time, losing these jobs means losing an income. And losing an income at that age means a lot of effects on their livelihoods as well. At the same time, older workers are not really supported by training. In fact, there's age discrimination in training, where human resources management feel that they should actually develop the young ones, because developing older workers is expensive. And so they face worse conditions than those who are in the age of 25, 54, which means again that they are a vulnerable population that they should be looked at as a target group if we're going to make sure that policy-wise we support their improvement in working conditions. At the same time, building social protection systems is not an easy thing for old workers. One, there are challenges of coverage. If you look at that graph, you will see that to the right side there, population above pensionable age receiving a pension, you'll see that in the Asia Pacific, of course, we have 73.5%, but when you go to the sub-regions, you'll see that Southern Asia has only 39.2% of those. Southern Eastern Asia, only 37.8%. And again, you can compare that with the left, which is the public social protection expenditure as a percentage of GDP. The more we invest in there, I think the more population that we can support above. I mean, we see Eastern Asia there, 6.3% of GDP, 98.9% of people that are supported. But again, here we are talking about old workers. We are talking about them not really having a good income. But in general, most of the labor market does not have very good incomes, because most of the times, 66% people are actually in informal employment. Now, the high prevalence of very low incomes also does affect sustainability of the social protection system. Now, lack of contributions, for example, will also mean lack of funding. This is something that is so special to support our older workers. This is my last slide, and I just want to end by saying that given the characteristics of our older workers, but also in general in the labor markets, we cannot afford not to promote decent work, to tackle today's labor market inequalities, and to prepare for aging societies. But it is clear when you read the report that this will have to do with raising productivity. It is clear when you read the report that this will have to do with reducing inequalities in income. It will be clear when you read the report that structural transformation is urgent, that moving from low productive sectors to higher productive sectors will be important because productivity is a real important issue. You will realize that training, that education are always important. You will realize that social dialogue is key, particularly for the things that we want to tackle together as workers, as employers, and as governments. Social dialogue becomes key. And of course, strengthening collective bargaining, but at the same time, moving from the informal economy to the formal economy, what we call the recommendation 204, will even be more important. Formalization will be key in this whole process. Of course, we must invest in social protection systems that are able to take care of our older people. We know that a number of other issues will come because of old age. The demand for care, health care, general care for the old will be there. But we must make sure that, first and foremost, our social protection systems do support the process. Thank you very much, Chair. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken, for that that presentation. Certainly a lot to unpack in the report. Let's turn now to the first of our guest speakers to add some additional analysis and discussion to these issues. Let me turn first to Dr. Srinivas Tata from UNESCAP. Dr. Tata, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Steve. I'm very grateful to the International Labour Organization for inviting ESCAP to the launch of this Asia Pacific Employment and Social Outlook report, which is, the report is extremely timely, relevant, and perhaps emphasizes some of the most critical challenges that our countries in the region face. What I'm going to do after your wonderful comprehensive presentation, Ken, is perhaps to highlight the policy implications of the data and analysis that have been presented by you, maybe in 3 areas, just given the short time, and I know Professor Rutia has also so much to offer. First, I'd like to pick up on your discussion on the issue of population aging and its impact in the region. In fact, it's all over. I'm finding everyone and the uncle are writing about it all over in the newspapers. And it's come to light. I'm very happy that it's getting the attention of the media and policymakers. Better late than never, but there are certain nuances that I'd like to highlight. First, yes, like Ken put it, our region is one of the fastest aging. Today, 1 in 7 are 60 years or older. But come 2050, 1 in 4 is going to be 60 years or older. Society is going to look very different. If you look at East and Northeast Asia, which is China, Japan, Korea, you're looking at 1 in 3 being 60 years older. Now, so by 2050, so we are essentially the number of older persons in our region would have doubled. Now, how did we get there? Total fertility rates that have contributed very largely, the precipitous drop in a way that in 1963, when we had the first Asia Pacific Population Conference, we had a region-wide average of 6 children. The total fertility rate was 6. Today, for the entire region, it's 1.9. So it's dropped by more than, it's come down to 1/3 of what it was, less than 1/3. And in certain, for example, in East and Northeast Asia, this fall has been from 6.5 to 1.2 today. It dropped by, to 1/5 of what it was. So this fall has been precipitous. Combine that with increases in life expectancy. In 1950, we had a life expectancy of 42.9 years for the region. Today, anyone born can live up to 73 years. And this is the average for the Asia Pacific region. And certain regions are much higher averages. Now, not only are more people surviving to old age, but once they reach there at 60, for example, they live longer. For example, life expectancy at 60 in our region, when you reach 60, you can expect to live, today, you can expect to live for an additional 20 years. And you're adding 4 years to it by 2050. That means if you're reaching 60 in 2050, you're going to reach at least the age of 84 on average. So you're talking about people not only reaching old age, but living much longer. Now, what has happened, and Ken explained it very well, that if you have very sharp drop in fertility and increase in life expectancy, obviously our region, the proportion of older persons has risen very dramatically. Countries in Europe and in developed regions had a very casual stroll when they went up to aging population, a lot of time to adjust. It took 100 years for some of them. For the Frances, the Spains, it took a long time. You know how long it took Singapore and the Republic of Korea? 17 and 18 years respectively, just to go from 7% aging population to 14% of the population, that fast. Even in our region, there are differences. Australia and New Zealand took more than 60 years, the more developed amongst them. So this fall has been very, very rapid. And I would like to focus on the fact that every region, even the ones which have relatively younger populations now, need to prepare. And I'd like to highlight the fact that the two largest, even if you look at India, we have youthful population. I have the first demographic dividend to harvest. But you're talking about 8% of a population of 1.4 billion. You're talking about more than 130 million older persons, just in absolute numbers. Same apply to Indonesia. So we have some of the in fact, some of the countries which have the lower, considered to have youthful populations, also have significant number of older persons and whose issues need to be addressed. Now, this has not happened overnight, and I'd like to come back to the discourse on this. This was an achievement. You wanted to offer women the choice, whether to how many children you wanted to extend reproductive and sexual, which is our objective. And you have improved health services, people live longer. And yet, when we have the changes associated to it, it's a disaster. It's a bomb. It's a problem. I think we need to adapt. The future is going to be one where populations are going to be older, and society needs to adapt. Many countries are saying, I'm going to switch off, I'm going to have more children, have policies where women are going back to having 3 or 4. It's not going to happen. You must get used and adapt to a situation where you will have older, and like Ken says, we need to adapt our labor markets and our economies so that we exploit the capacity of older workers. So what I'm asking for here is that we have a nuanced view, where we look at a situation where older persons remain healthy and active longer, and the whole concept of dependency ratios really change. I don't think older persons should be seen as dependent just because they reach the age of 60. In fact, it's not true. A lot of them are not that. And for the first time in our region, we are seeing significant cohorts of older and younger populations are going to coexist together. The term intergenerational solidarity acquires a real meaning. It's not a cliche anymore. And we have to find ways of where different generations really support each other. So that is something that even now, as you can see, there are a number of older persons who are in the labor force. Some of them out of choice, but a lot of them because they don't have income security. Because social protection is not available to older persons. They are in the labor market because they have no other option. But we have to find policies where we really ensure that our older persons are healthy and remain active longer. Brings me to the second point, the importance of social protection. And I think Ken highlighted, we know that during the COVID-19 pandemic, poverty has increased. We had additional almost 150 million people who got driven into poverty. Even now, when you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, the progress on universal social protection has not been very good. Maybe it's only about 21.7% of the progress that has to be made has been made so far. So it needs to be accelerated. And if we don't accelerate progress, our estimates by 2040, another 250,000 people will be poorer. And I think the key to our region, as Ken pointed out, is a question of informality. Very Informality is the norm rather than the exception in the Asia Pacific region. And it has many facets. It has self-employed, seasonal farm laborers, daily wage workers, domestic workers, and home-based workers. Even people who were in the formal sector, like gig economy workers and migrant workers, are not getting social protection. It's seeing a reversal. So I think we need to place more emphasis on social protection to address the realities. Otherwise, poor working people will tomorrow really transition to becoming poorer older people. And decent work, as has been pointed out, is a challenge. We need training and we need active labor market policies, both for the young of today or the older people of tomorrow and people who are already old. I think we have a double challenge there. And I think our governments need to realize that extending social protection builds solidarity to combat inequalities. If you're going to have rising inequalities, that in turn will create a lack of solidarity. And therefore, we believe extending social protection or moving towards the universal access to social protection is one of the main important tools of trust building in the society, which is absolutely needed. And my last and final point relates to the low female labor force participation of women all over. We show on an average in our region, female labor force participation is 47% against 75% for men. Many women in our region are in unpaid domestic and care work, and their contribution to society is not recorded or acknowledged. Women in our region spend 11 hours a day on unpaid care and domestic work, which is 4 times the amount of time that is spent by men. So very few of them actually access the labor market. So when we look at lower differences in employment between men and women, I also like to think that is also the rates of unemployment in women are lower because very few of them are actually in the labor market. And wherever they are in the labor market, in many countries, they are overrepresented in the informal sector. If we, according to ILO's estimates, if we add 1% of female employment, in the labor market, the annual GDP growth can go up by 0.16% annual. The others, if you calculate the total amount of unpaid care work carried out by women, it adds to $3.8 trillion if you really took that into account, rather than keeping it out of the calculations. So I believe one of the most sustainable and just ways of maintaining labor productivity in light of aging of populations is to increase women's labor force participation, and that can only be done if we invest in policies and programs that reduce, redistribute, and adequately reward care work. The RRR framework is to recognize the work they're doing, reduce the work, and also redistribute from women to men. And so I think ILO has added a couple of other elements of rewards for care workers as well as adequate representation. We need to improve care infrastructure and also have employment-related care policies to expand family-friendly arrangements. Thank you very much, ILO, for this report, and I look forward to working with you in really bringing it to member states.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Tata, Dr. Srinivas, for that intervention. Let's turn now to Dr. Rutia. Dr. Rutia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. First of all, let me thank for this wonderful opportunity and this excellent report. It's very comprehensive and very detailed, and also very honored to be here with Dr. Srinivas. First of all, I'd like to highlight that when we talk about aging societies, and just to add to that, to the point that Dr. Srinivas has already mentioned, is that we are not really look at the age as just a number. We have the concept of relative age and absolute age, so that when we talk about the aging society, it means that we are talking about a society that having a larger share of the older person in terms of the number. But we have to cope with the point that we are not yet talking about their capacity, their ability to be empowered. So I think first of all, I've found many points here listing that aging society is a challenge. yeah, I would like to emphasize that is this quite a challenge, but at the same time, it could be opportunities. Maybe we can emphasize that we can highlight on the opportunities in the aging society, and how can we maximize the benefits of coming into the age society. But keeping in mind that we are looking at the region with the diverse characteristics. I mean, we have the developed countries that really prepare and already reach the point that they can be able to, the older persons can be able to live in a certain level of well-being, while we also have a numbers of developing countries that having difficulties in coping with the situation. So in the link to that, then we are going to face a regional challenge. I'm taking the term challenge because we're going to see our numbers of migration increased. In response to the labor shortages, and also in response to the demand for care. So that in that sense, we will need more report on data in projecting or estimating the impact that would happening for the in terms of the age society. For example, how many people are we talking about in the care economy? And how can we cope with that, in which we would require the policy dialogue at the regional level. Because there will be a numbers of countries will be really suffering from this the labor shortages for this particular sector. That's the first point. And the second point, I like to highlight that when we talk about the policy in the national level, I think one of the policies that we might add is how to cope or how to empower people in our generations to be able to enjoy in the labor market. Even it's already changed, and given that we are facing the increasing in inequalities because of the climate change and also the digital inequalities. So I think perhaps that idea would be highlighted as the challenge. This is actually the challenge, especially the country with the high digital inequalities that have to increase the numbers or the share of formality in the society. And so there is another point that can already highlight on the gender challenge. But the gender here, we are talking about a larger share of older women. And for the older women who are already out of labor force for a long time, it would be really difficult for them to re-enter into the labor force. And you will see a larger number of these chair. So that not only the Social Security policy, but also how we can empower the older women along with their household household unit in order to make sure that they can be able to cope with this situation. So the other point I'd like to also mention about the increased in the intergenerational approach that we will going to require in the tailor-made context on the countries. In a sense, this is to highlight the points that Dr. Sriwas mentioned as well, because within the society or within the country that we have various or diverse dimensions of the age structure, we will really require the assistance within the unit, and how can we pass on transit from this situation to a better well-being. So I think what I'm highlighting would be focusing on the policy, because in terms of the numbers, it's really already very comprehensively documented. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rutia, and our speakers today. Okay, let's now turn to any questions you may have or any comments. If anyone would like to pose a question, please, we'll turn to the floor first. Also, those of you who are following us online, if you'd like to drop any question in the chat, it will be conveyed to me by some magic means, and we can post those. Any questions at all? Any thoughts anybody would like to make? Get started. There's a microphone is at the back. Please, sir.
Thanks, Steve. Sorry about that. Yeah, Jonathan Head from BBC. I'm just curious about how much progress governments in this region, particularly Southeast Asia, are making in meeting the need for social safety nets, particularly in terms of pension schemes, because it's something that seems to be a yawning gap, and you've raised that challenge. It's just going to become far more acute as this region ages so rapidly. Are you seeing adequate responses by governments? I mean, really genuine progress towards providing more universal safety nets and pension schemes for people where there seems to be a yawning gap at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks. Any volunteers to take this one on? Dr. Tata? Yeah.
Yes, in Southeast Asia, I think there's an increasing acknowledgement that this is an issue, and member states within ESCAP, and it is actually led by a number of Southeast Asian countries who have signed up to a regional action plan for strengthening social protection, which is built on the ILO social protection floor. So we saw at least 3 to 4 countries within the Southeast Asia, within the ASEAN region, actually doing assessments of gaps in social protection. For the first time, we are seeing countries actually sitting down, because social protection policies are implemented by the different parts of government, and sometimes they're not necessarily speaking to each other, not necessarily coordinated. And we are seeing now perhaps an effort to coordinate this across. They're seeking assistance of ILO at the country level, but more importantly, they're actually there's a structured approach within ASEAN, I think, where they're trying to address these gaps. They're sitting down and they understand that if they don't address it now, in many ways, that they will land up with a very big problem of large number of older persons who are there without social protection. Now, many of them have gone for, a lot of people have reached old age without having contributed to a pension scheme. So some of them are being helped by social pension schemes, which are essentially non-contributory pensions, which are not necessarily as much as of the level that you would want, but still there are decent stopgap measures. But I do think there are very strong encouraging signs within the Southeast Asian region that they are aging very fast, and if they are to maintain they have to the need for them to really ensure that older people are protected for a longer time. But of course, they're struggling with the issue of, they're still also coming around to the fact that how do I maintain labor productivity? There is still a lot of, I think, room for them to ensure that older people stay productive for longer, stay longer in the labor force. These have different approaches in different countries, but I definitely see this on their agenda right now, very high, and it's an issue that many governments are willing to address upfront as part of policy dialogues in the UN itself. Maybe Steve, you can.
Yeah, thanks very much. My colleague has mentioned very well the role that government is playing. I want to mention the role that the ILO is playing in supporting these governments. So the ILO, in its decent work agenda, puts social protection as a key pillar in providing and promoting decent work. And so it is already inculcated in the policies that the ILO actually promotes, working with government. But at the same time, the ILO has promoted what we call the Global Accelerator on Jobs and Social Protection, which seeks to coordinate efforts to support social protection coverage, working with governments and what we call tripartite constituents to make sure that governments take up an accelerated role in supporting access to social protection. At the same time, the ILO is promoting the concept of social justice. With it, it is promoting what we call the Social Justice Coalition. One of the pillars of that coalition is actually social protection. And social protection here meaning access, making sure that even those who are a vulnerable target, like the older workers, are actually taken care of. So the ILO works with governments to support this, and will continue to do that. Thank you.
Just add. So just to add to the term social safety net, I think one thing that we have to think of is not just only the government itself, but also we're talking about the society as a whole. So in the AP countries, we have the families, we have the household to support, but at the same time, we are facing a very challenging situation in the sense that the household size, the culture has already changed. So in that sense, it is also emphasized, there is a very high necessity for the government to readjust and especially among the developing countries, we require to support the older person who are poor.
Okay, thank you. Let me turn to a question I have received from the chat from Imitaz Mukbil. What will be the impact of increasing usage of robots across many jobs, especially repetitive jobs done by the low-income workers? So we all hear an awful lot about AI, technology. Will AI and technology save the Asia Pacific region from the woes of an aging population? Ken, over to you.
So a number of issues come to mind when we deal with the robotization, if I can use that word. So one aspect is to see what impact it will have on those who are probably less skilled, for example, have a low education. I think what the ILO is doing is to ensure that we develop skills systems, skills upgrading, reskilling, and so on, to make sure that people are able to adjust to other kind of job lines, if you like. So really it is a case where we realize that this is there, robotization will come, some people will lose jobs, but I think it's important to take into account that so that we are able to actually promote the right skills so that we ameliorate the effects of those who would actually lose jobs. In fact, there has been research which has shown that adopting to new technologies can also be supported by making sure that people who are losing the job that side are skilled to take up other jobs as well. So I think that would be a good thing. For me, I think it is skills development.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Ladies and gentlemen, any other questions from the floor? Anything? Or from those following us online? Yeah, please, Stefan. Do you want to? Sorry. The lady at the back, please. Thank you. If you can use the microphone so the folks online can hear. Thanks.
It's not a question, it's just a comment, and I would like to thank ILO for this very good study. I am Dr. Olivia Niveras from WHO, and I would just like to say that this is very timely because in the health sector, we have been talking about this issue. And in fact, Thailand has raised this as one of the key priorities, the falling TFR and the aging society. And the country has really taken leadership in this area. One of the things I would like to share is that Thailand has this ASEAN Center for Innovation and Aging. And this is one idea that maybe we can think about how the different countries in the region can share their strategies and have like horizontal collaboration in terms of how to deal with this issue, because it's not only Thailand but a lot of other countries, as you mentioned, Dr. And for UN, we have been working on the UN Decade of Healthy Aging, and a lot of work has been done in this area, and it's really monitored. In fact, last year we have done the survey to see how the different countries are fulfilling the different strategies. And as you know, there are 4 strategies for the UN Decade of Healthy Aging: promoting age-friendly societies, combating ageism, promoting health plus social care in an integrated way and not just like in silos. And there's another one, long-term care, which you mentioned. So this is something that I would like to share from the UN, and I hope that we can contribute and work together as one society, one government approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, please, Dr. Tata.
I think I'd like to thank the speaker for really introducing a very important issue about the fact that if you want to have healthy older persons, one of the key things is to have, I think in terms of Thailand, one of the most spectacular achievements that they have made is the provision of universal health care. And I think Thailand was a country that showed that you could introduce universal health care at a relatively early level of development. It took the commitment, they've stuck to it, and the results will show. Because I think you don't look at healthy aging after a person reaches the age of 60. It's what you do as a younger person and what you do before often that dictates what will be your state of health when you cross 60. So you need to adopt a life course approach if you want healthy older persons. So that's very essential. And the importance of innovation, I mean, when you talk about issues like intergenerational solidarity, what are countries doing? What do you mean by that? Well, you look at Vietnam. Vietnam has a very large number, not of older persons clubs, they're known as intergenerational clubs, where younger persons do community service and teach older persons skills in terms of IT skills and skills which are on technology, which older persons may not have. And this really contributes to a much better understanding. And this is it's a model that's being adapted to other countries too. So I think innovation will remain key. If you're going to, I think, telehealth, in providing outreach, I think health systems also need to change to really adapt to the needs of older persons. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Doctor.
I'd like to add this point as well, because it's really related to labor market. When we talk about the working age population, I mean, we scope people to work. We're assuming that they're going to work starting from 15 to 60 or 65 years old. But that's why it comes with the figures. But what I'm going to highlight is that we have to highlight on the life course approach, thinking that how would be, they have to continue to be active, not within the labor market itself, but also maybe in other activities. And that would cause that would generate the active, healthy aging, and also it would reduce the ageism that we are facing right now in terms of entering for older person, relatively older person to enter into labor market. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I have another question from following online. A number of countries in the region which are aging rapidly, such as Korea, Singapore, Japan, are rich countries. How about countries such as Thailand, which is obviously not as economically far down the road as some of those other countries? What kind of steps can a country such as Thailand, which is aging rapidly, take when it has less, perhaps, economic or financial headroom to manage these challenges? Dr. Ruti, I think that's one for you.
Or in the case of Thailand, right? This is very challenging for Thailand in particular. I'm wearing the hat for Thai. Then, because Thai is one of the fastest rate of becoming aging while we're still poor, and that's the point. If we become age, once we already have some certain level of income, it would be not really in concern. So how would we tackle this one? It means that we need to at least like design to dual system, the dual track for the track that they're already old, they're already facing a very high challenges in entering into labor market or having a very poor, decent, poor working conditions. Then there would be one track that we have to help them to make sure that they have opportunities for working, for the decent work, and being formalized at a certain point. But at the same time, for the other track, we have to make sure that those who are in the pipeline should be encouraged to design their life and having opportunities for work or having a better life plan, so that they can be able to facilitate their life and maximize their own potentials. But at the same time, for the government side, we have to admit that we have really limited resources in supporting this group of people. That's why we need to make sure that we provide them opportunities, we enhance commodities capacities, and we ensure that everyone in the society joining this initiative, otherwise would be really out of reach of the government to do effectively in this situation. And I think, yeah.
So my take is that we need to emphasize the idea that this is a life course process. So as Dr. Srinivas put it before, we will not wait until somebody is aged for us to start our policies. We need to start immediately, mainstream these. From a macroeconomic point of view, I would say this is a core for policies that support growth, policies that support productivity growth, policies that support redistribution, policies that make sure that these economies are able to stand with such. But of course, the social part of it is important, to be able to trickle down the macroeconomic benefits to those who are actually targeted. So to me, this is the core for us to really have better policies for macroeconomic management, better policies to ensure that everybody is included. In other words, inclusive growth promotion, which is also pro-employment. Thank you.
Thanks. Dr. Tata.
I think firstly, I think Thailand is upper middle income country, and I think I wouldn't call it poor. There are a lot of countries, and it's taken some very important steps. But in terms of, if you're looking at group of countries which are not so developed and yet reaching this stage, I think there are some basics. One, there are two: income security, health security. And the best way, first, you have to go for universal health care. Without that, you will always, unless you really protect the health of the younger people, in the future too, the cost of ill health among older persons is going to be far more expensive for society. Universal health care, countries need to progress towards that. Even if you're not doing it all at once, the question. Second, the question is, are we preparing well enough? I don't think we're preparing well enough, because we have such a big informal sector that's not going to disappear at the wave of a wand. I know formalization is going to be the way to go, but we have large informal sector. We have to find a way of extending social protection to people in the informal sector. There have been some exercises done in this regard, but I think it's the duty of all, whether it be governments, the UN, and others, to really find a way in which, innovative ways in which we cannot afford to have another big cohort of young people aging without having adequate income protection. Otherwise, the load on member states to really provide, again, social assistance in such a large amount is going to be difficult. We are only going to multiply the problem if we don't find a way of ensuring at least the working age population today we must find ways of ensuring that they can contribute towards the retirement system. And apart from that, I think there are low-hanging fruits. Even now, I find in the public sector, you have retirement ages of 58 and 60, and a young woman having lower retirement age than men. Why is that? I mean, the fact is, women live longer, but yet there are countries, outliers, where women are supposed to retire earlier than men. I think the question is not about extending retirement age in the formal sector, but make it flexible. I think there are certain maybe areas of work where older persons would like to be in, would like to retire earlier. It's a choice. It's their choice if they're ready to. But I think even now there's a huge scope for retirement ages to be extended in a number of countries in the formal sector. Thank you.
Just to add a little bit, or in terms of the Thailand context, in the sense that we're because of middle income country, right? But at the same time, we are facing the high income inequality. That's why we need to make sure as well that in all countries that with this kind of challenge can be, can be able to cope with this challenge and opportunities.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rotia. Any last questions, ladies and gentlemen? Any last call? No. Well, if that's the case, then let's. We're almost bang on time. I'd just like to just to wrap things up. Just like to hand the microphone just for the last few words to Kumpanada Bunpala, who is the Deputy Regional Director for ILO here in Asia Pacific, based in Bangkok. Kunpin, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Thank you so much, everyone. First and foremost, I'd like to sincerely thank all of you for coming here to be with us today, both being here in the room with us, but also joining us online for this launch of the Asia Pacific Employment and Social Outlook report. I want to thank a very special way to our speakers, Professor Dr. Ratia Pula, Vice Dean, College of Population Studies, and Director Collaborating Center for Labor Research, Chulalongkorn University, and to our dear friend, Dr. Srinivas Tata, Director of the Social Development Division of the UN ASCAP. I think both of you have shared a lot of your very interesting thoughts based on the presentation by the ILO team and Ken today. The ILO is also very grateful for the participation of representatives from the government of Thailand, our social partners, academic and research institute, civil society, our friends from the media, and of course our colleagues from the UN agencies. Thank you so much for coming. My colleague Steve already mentioned that the Asia Pacific Employment and Social Outlook is a biennial publication of the ILO regional office here in Bangkok, and we present trends in key labor market indicators and then have particularly theme of relevance to the region. I'm glad to hear feedback that the theme of this year, of this volume, is timely. As this report team is promoting decent work and social justice to manage aging, I hope that the findings of the report have provided catalysts, thinkers to look about policy options. And we also have heard some very good questions from our audience on policy dimensions to respond to these very challenging trends in our region. And of course, from the ILO perspective, we hope that older workers are given opportunities and also they are protected with decent working conditions. We have learned a lot from our speakers here today. We also have learned a lot from the discussions from the audience in the room and the audience who have joined us online. So we hope that we can continue to work together on this very important topic. I think all the questions that we received today provide us very good perspective to look into different dimensions of this very important issue. Finally, allow me and all of us to thank our host, the FCCT, and for me, I have to thank my ILO team for putting all of this report and this presentation together today. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody. We are done. The report is online. We also, as I say, had the QR codes and some hard copies here. If you have any questions, if you're media or if you're just interested and you'd like to follow up with any of us, please shout out. Thanks again for coming. If you're not an FCCT member, please sign up, please join. It's a great club. We should take every possible opportunity to support it. Thank you, everybody. Thanks. Goodbye.